and Women Symposium, and a former member of the White House Correspondents Association's Board of Directors. I am very pleased now to turn the floor over to our distinguished speaker, Jodi Enda.
Thank you, Nancy, and thanks for everyone for being here. I want to thank the entire Lunch and Learn team for setting this up, and especially thank David Diskin, who is handling the visuals for my presentation. Thank you, David, so much. When Nancy told me that there was going to be a big crowd today, I got a little nervous because I realized I'd forgotten how to put on makeup after all these months. Then I wondered whether I needed to wear pants instead of, my usual shorts. And of course, I had to set up a table in front of our bookshelf. So a lot of pressure, but I'm going to dig right in. Some voices. I am 110% Trump. I love him. I love the way he talks. I understand him more than any other president. He talks my language. A lot of other presidents talk those big words. I thought they were talking to higher class people. Barbara Bono, age 63. He has a kind heart. All that hubbub about him making remarks about women, that's just a facade. He's a gentle person. Joyce Weber, age 76. He's the best president of my lifetime. He works night and day. He is fearless. He's not afraid to say what he thinks. I think that he was chosen by God because this nation was praying for change. Linda Stetzar, age 78. These are a few of the women I met and kept in touch with over the past several months. Women who live in northeastern Pennsylvania. Women who have voted for Democrats for most of their lives. Women who are white, who did not graduate from college, and who helped elect Donald Trump. Before I share their stories, I think I should tell you why I sought them out in the first place. To explain that, I'm going to start with what I know best, newspapers. I love newspapers. I love everything about them. I love how they feel. I love the crinkling sound they make when I turn the pages. I love how they can surprise me with information I don't know. The newsprint doesn't rub off on your hands the way it used to, but that's not such a bad thing. Papers online, where they have space to go well beyond what fits on the printed page. Many of my favorite days were spent working at newspapers. But newspapers and journalism in general are going through very tough times right now, have been for a number of years, and it shows in the coverage of the presidential election. Too few reporters are out in the country interviewing, listening to potential voters. This was a problem 4 years ago too, which helps explain why the media were blindsided by Trump's victory. Of course, the largest news outlets are still conducting polls. As of now, these polls suggest that things are looking good for Joe Biden nationally and in the 6 states generally viewed as the battlegrounds this year: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina. Since 2016, Democrats have gained support among suburbanites and college-educated white voters, 2 groups that helped them take control of the House in 2018. Black voters, of course, continue to be the strongest, most loyal Democratic voters, and white men without college degrees are the strongest, most loyal Republican voters. But many Democratic pollsters and a fair number of journalists have suggested that Trump is losing support among a group that was critical to his election 4 years ago: white women without college degrees. They have soured on him, these folks say, because of his behavior and most recently because of his responses to the coronavirus. Starting last November, I set out to talk to some of these women in a pivotal part of Pennsylvania. I wanted to know not only whether they had turned away from Trump, but about what issues motivated them and what would influence their voting decisions. This was not a scientific undertaking. I was not conducting a poll, but more of a listening tour, what we in the business call shoe leather reporting. So I drove to Luzerne and Lackawanna counties, which are a couple of hours north of Philadelphia in the heart of a region that handed Pennsylvania, and therefore the White House, to Trump. Uh-oh, my speech just disappeared. Hold on.
Oh, sorry, Jodi.
There we go. Okay, thanks, David. At least I know you're on the job.
Yes.
Okay, so this part of Pennsylvania handed the White House to Trump in 2016. Sorry about that, people. I have written a lengthy article about my travels, which we can share with you once it's online. Some of what I say here comes from that piece. Let me just remind you of how close this election was. Trump beat Hillary Clinton by less than 78,000 votes in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan combined. Those were the states that gave him an electoral college victory. More than half of that vote margin, 44,000 votes, came from Pennsylvania, the largest of the 3 states with 20 electoral votes. And fully 1/3 of Trump's 3-state margin of victory came from Luzerne County, 1988, and that has voted for the presidential candidate who carried Pennsylvania ever since FDR took office. Trump carried Luzerne by more than 26,000 votes, a 19-point margin over Clinton, the largest gap since Richard Nixon won in 1972. Next door in Lackawanna County, which is 3/4 Democratic, Clinton won, but by a sliver, just 3,600 votes, even though she had a long-standing relationship in the area. Her father grew up in the county seat of Scranton and is buried there, and Clinton spent her childhood summers at a nearby lake. So what happened? I won't bore you with too many numbers, but these are key. Trump beat Clinton by 27 points among white women without college degrees. 27 points. That was a significant shift from the previous 2 elections. White voters without college degrees, commonly called the white working class, make up the largest group of voters by far, representing 45% of the electorate in 2016. By comparison, the next largest group, college-educated whites, represented 29% of voters. The gap is even greater in Pennsylvania, where 53% of 2016 voters were white and working class. This is true even though that group turns out at a significant counterparts.
You're muted.
While there are no county breakdowns, both Luzerne that sounds like that's
Someone has their phone on. And just let me double check.
Thanks, David.
Yeah. So far, I muted 1 person. Okay, let's give it another shot. Sorry, let me share my screen again. Jodi, you might want to back up a little bit.
All right.
When I get.
So I was talking about the large percentage of the population made up of white working class voters. And saying that the gap is even greater in Pennsylvania. 53% of 2016 voters there were white and working class. And they don't vote in as high as rates as white college-educated voters, but there are just many, many more of them. And as with every constituency, women make up the larger percentage of voters in every group than men do, and that's the white working class as well. There aren't county by county breakdowns, but Luzerne and Lackawanna counties have a greater proportion of white working class people than the state as a whole. I'd like to paint a picture of this region. Luzerne and Lackawanna counties share a beautiful rolling landscape in the Appalachian Mountain Range and in the valleys along the Susquehanna River and its tributaries. As I drove through their towns, I couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. The same banners bearing images of local war heroes dotted their main streets, but locals know the difference between towns with names George and 40 Fort, Nanticoke and Hazleton and Avoca and Moosic. To a person, they will tell you that the Irish settled this town, the Italians that town, the Poles moved here and the Germans there. They wear their heritage proudly. Their ancestors came from Europe to mine anthracite coal, which they did for generations until the mines closed in the middle of the last century. Immigrants built their churches, most often Catholic, and on Sunday mornings they would file into Irish and Polish and Italian and German and Slovak houses of worship, all within a few blocks of each other. In recent times, as parishioners dwindled, many churches have joined together. So you might have Polish Catholics going down the street to the Irish Catholic Church, or vice versa. To this day, families remain close. As I roamed the two counties, I came across pairs of sisters, mothers and daughters, aunts and nieces dining or working or playing bingo together. Almost all were descendants of those early miners. They stayed close to home, in the same small towns, in the same neighborhoods, sometime in the same houses as their parents and grandparents. But in recent years, after the coal mines closed and lace factories came and went, more and more residents have departed as well. Young people who attend college leave most frequently because there just aren't enough white-collar jobs close to home. Those who stay are largely white, aging men and women who were raised to work hard, pray regularly, and support each other. They are often more conservative than their children. They are courteous and unhurried, the kind of people who nonchalantly call strangers like me, hun. They work for state or local government or for healthcare providers or a local university or, increasingly, for one of the warehouses and call centers that have popped up along the interstates. They say they don't expect something for nothing and disdain the notion that government entitlements solve problems, theirs or anyone else's. They still revere JFK, the first Catholic president, who made some of his last campaign stops in Lackawanna County. So again, I ask, what happened? My research suggests 4 things. 1, as the economy rebounded in many parts of the country, working class people in hard-hit towns like the ones in these 2 counties felt left behind. 2, voters there strongly disliked Hillary Clinton, who visited the area just once and called social conservatives like them deplorables. 3, they loved Donald Trump, a guy who talked to them, not down to them, who visited the area repeatedly, including the night before the election, and pledged to lift up, quote, the forgotten people. And 4, Trump tapped into their anger and their racism with his attacks on immigrants and his promise to build a wall. The bottom line is that Trump connected with them. Don't take it from me. Listen to State Senator John Udachak, who last fall left the Democratic Party and declared himself an independent. He blamed what he called purists in the party for marginalizing, forgetting, his constituents, conservative and moderate Democrats like him who oppose abortion rights and any attempt to weaken gun rights. Quote, those that do not have a college education, working class, religious, devoted to their faith, are somehow not valued, Udachak told me as we sat in his Nanticoke office in a downtown riddled with vacant storefronts. That was the sense of Hillary Clinton, that we just don't feel valued by the candidate, by the party, he said. Udachak, who has endorsed Biden, told me that following one of Trump's 2016 rallies in Wilkes-Barre, he asked people who attended to explain the appeal. He quoted one Democratic Union member who said, I go to church on Sunday and I hunt on Saturday. Hillary Clinton makes me feel bad about myself. Donald Trump makes me feel good about myself. Trump made an emotional connection by telling people he would fight for their jobs and their communities, their heritage and their faith, Udachak said. He made them feel like they mattered. He made them feel like they mattered. As they say, all the rest is commentary. The women I spoke to have made plain that there is little, if anything, that would make them abandon Trump. Not the emergence of Joe Biden, who was fond of invoking his early childhood in Scranton. Not a quarantine that has cost some of them their wages. Not the ensuing economic fallout. And certainly not the Trump detractors who say he mishandled the life and death issues that have consumed the nation these past months. The coronavirus, the police killing of George Floyd, and the systemic racism that it brought to the fore. Again, listen to Barbara Bono, a retired Lord & Taylor warehouse worker. I love the way he talks. Crazy Nancy, I love it. When he does that stuff, he makes me feel like he's one of me. I met Bono on a snowy January night at a weekly bingo game in the basement of St. Andrew Parish in Wilkes-Barre. Bono is precisely the kind of voter Democrats hope to win back. She's a registered Democrat and former union member who never voted Republican before casting a ballot for Trump. She is Catholic, like so many in these parts, but supports abortion rights. She thought Bill Clinton was a wonderful president and didn't care for George W. Bush. She voted for Obama in 2008, but sat out the election of 2012 because she said his Affordable Care Act drove up her healthcare costs. This is how she thinks about Trump. He talks like your everyday person. I love the fact that he doesn't take a paycheck. It shows that he is not there just to sit behind a desk. He is up early in the morning. I know because I watch Fox News. He's always talking to the American people. He's all about our country. Pelosi! I can't wait for her teeth to fall out. Of course, Trump's appeal goes beyond his manner of speaking. Almost everyone I talked to mentioned one issue: illegal immigration. Luzerne and Lackawanna counties don't have a lot of immigrants. What people talk about, though, is Hazleton, a Luzerne County town of about 25,000 that is nearly 57% Latino. In 2000, Hazleton had a Latino population of less than 5%. Since then, the town added warehouse jobs that attracted people from New York and New Jersey. Political scientists from local universities told me that the Latino residents, most of them legal or citizens, essentially saved a dying city. They took jobs in meatpacking plants and distribution centers that old-time residents didn't want, and they started small businesses of their own. But that's not the way a lot of white people see it. Here's what one bingo player told me. They basically took over the city, and now the city is a mess. The violence, the guns, the fighting, the nonsense. Why do American people have to put up with that? You come to our country, you should learn the language and be self-sufficient. The women I interviewed were more cautious when talking about Black people, who constitute just 6% of the population in Luzerne County and 4% in Lackawanna. And they were quick to condemn the 4 Minneapolis police officers charged in Floyd's killing. But when I asked about the systemic racism that has been the focus of protests, even in their counties, the women spoke instead of looting and violence. I'm appalled. I'm appalled by the fact that people are destroying businesses. This was about a man that got hurt during a police arrest. But these people come in from out of town and loot and burn down buildings, said Linda Stetzar. She also invoked a false conservative anti-Semitic trope to blame the protests on George Soros. To me, he's a communist, she said. He likes to see people threatened. He's interfered with everything we've done in the American life. The comments I heard are puzzling in an area dominated by white churchgoers, both in population and power. I asked several office holders and political scientists to explain. They all said different versions of the same thing. Here's Kevin Blom, a Democrat who represented Luzerne County in the Pennsylvania House for 24 years. They voted for Barack twice. It wasn't until Trump said, "Send them all back," that they switched. There was something about him uttering those words out loud that worked for him. Blom still seems shocked that his voters sided with Trump. These are the people who need the Democratic Party the most, he told me. These are low-income and middle-income, hardworking people. What the Democratic Party is espousing is in their interest. They voted against that. What would make them do that? Send them back is the only thing I heard. The women I spoke to didn't agree with Trump on everything. For instance, even though they opposed illegal immigration, most didn't think he should have put children in cages. Some liked the idea of expanding access to health care. Many found his treatment of women distasteful and brought it up unprovoked. When I was eating lunch with one woman at the Glider Diner in Scranton, our waitress overheard us discussing politics. She chimed in, "Trump! I don't like the womanizing, but I love him." Then she left to serve other diners. It wasn't long before she returned. "I like a Patton type of guy. He doesn't take no baloney," said the waitress, Flo Eldridge, age 67. Did I always like Trump? No, because of the women. I just felt like he likes all the women. You know what? I still like him. Of course, I met some women who don't like Trump. They offered some interesting insights about their friends and neighbors. Take Lisa Stull, age 56, who was raised Roman Catholic in a house with a photo of JFK on the wall, and later became an evangelical Christian who worked at a church camp. Stull considers Trump a disgrace, but she says her involvement with 2 churches gives her a window into the thinking of Trump supporters. Conservative Christians have felt attacked. I don't believe it to be a real threat, but they felt attacked with gay rights, abortion rights. They feel threatened by liberalism and what they see as a decline in America. Trump has created a fear that people are going to lose their Christianity. They're going to lose their guns. They're going to lose God, all the things that are important to people in this area, Stull said. Before I finish, I want to tell you about one more woman I met, Virginia Hazuri, who owns a hair salon in a town called Pittston. Hazuri, who is 59, voted for Hillary Clinton 4 years ago and describes herself as generally liberal. In truth, she vacillates on political issues, opposing abortion rights, for instance, but supporting same-sex marriage. When I met her in November, Hazuri told me she disliked Trump's demeanor and considered him to be ignorant. But she said she was leaning toward voting for him anyway because her 401k was doing so well. In May, with the economy in a free fall, I thought she might be leaning in the other direction. I was wrong. I think we've got to give him credit. He's doing the best he can, Hazuri told me. Honestly, right now, if I had to go today, I would say President Trump. I will leave you with 2 looming questions to which I don't have the answers. First, can Biden shave off enough of Trump's margin among white working class women to ensure victory in Pennsylvania and other swing states? And second, does he need to? Perhaps white suburban voters who voted Democratic in 2018 will stick with the party. Perhaps urban voters, and particularly Black voters, will turn out in larger numbers than they did 4 years ago. There's no way to know, and the coronavirus and efforts to suppress the vote and limit mail-in ballots make predicting this election more complicated than ever. Biden is not ignoring these white working class voters. In fact, he's scheduled to tour a metalworks facility in Lackawanna County tomorrow. Trump cannot win without significant support from women like the ones I talked to. Whether he can hang on to enough of them will determine whether he's reelected.